When a 17-year-old and his younger sister are kicked out of their last foster home, they're left with nothing but a bus ticket and a cryptic deed to a worthless patch of land. But what they discovered buried there wasn't just a shelter. It was a secret that would force them to redefine the meaning of family and home forever. If you've ever felt lost and wondered if you had the strength to start over, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, because we're about to get into it. The gray fabric of the bus seat was coarse against my cheek, each vibration of the road a dull tremor that ran straight through my bones. Outside, the world was a smear of gray and brown, skeletal trees clawing at a sky the color of dishwater. It had been raining for 2 days straight, a cold, persistent drizzle that matched the feeling in my chest. Beside me, my sister Maya was asleep, her head resting on my shoulder. She was 15, but in sleep she looked younger. The hard lines of worry around her mouth softened. Her breathing was a small, steady rhythm in the rumbling quiet of the bus. I was 17, just 3 months shy of aging out of a system that had already chewed us up and spit us out more times than I could count. This time felt different. This time felt final. In my pocket, my fingers kept finding the sharp edges of the folded paper, the only thing we had left in the world. It wasn't money. It was a deed. A quitclaim deed, to be precise, for a 1-acre parcel of unincorporated land in a county I'd never heard of, a place called Sparrow Creek. The filing fee, stamped in faded purple ink, was $4. It was dated 1982. Our grandfather's name, Thomas Vance, was printed in a neat architectural script at the bottom. A man we barely remembered, a ghost from a life before this one. Our last foster mother, Brenda, had thrown it at me as we were leaving. "Here," she'd said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "This came for your mother years ago. It's probably worthless, but it's all you've got. Now, get out." And so we did. With one shared duffel bag, the last $27 from my under-the-table dishwashing job, and this strange, flimsy piece of paper. The bus groaned as it took a wide turn, the tires hissing on the wet pavement. I looked down at Maya, at the dark circles under her eyes. I felt a familiar hot knot of anger and fear tighten in my gut. It was my job to protect her. I had been failing at it spectacularly for years. This piece of paper wasn't a lifeline. It felt like a joke, a final, cosmic punchline to a story that was never very funny to begin with. But it was also the only thing pointing anywhere. Every other road was a dead end. The bus engine changed its tune, gearing down as we rolled past a rusted sign that read, "Welcome to Blackwood, population 814. This was our stop, the end of the line, in more ways than one. I gently shook Maya's shoulder. "Hey, we're here." Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with sleep, and then clearing with the stark, immediate memory of our situation. She didn't ask if we were okay. We both knew the answer. She just sat up, straightened her thin hoodie, and looked out the window at the bleak little town materializing through the rain. "Okay," she said, her voice small but firm. "Let's go." The bus station in Blackwood wasn't so much a station as a small, stained brick shed with a single bench and a flickering fluorescent light that made everything look sickly and green. The air smelled of damp concrete and diesel fumes. The bus pulled away with a hydraulic sigh, leaving us standing under the weak shelter of the overhang, the drizzle instantly finding its way to our skin. We were the only 2 people who had gotten off. The town was silent, shrouded in the late afternoon gloom. A few storefronts across the street were dark, their windows dusty. A single traffic light blinked yellow over an empty intersection. This wasn't just a small town. It felt like a forgotten one. Maya shivered, pulling the sleeves of her hoodie down over her hands. Now what, Leo? I pulled the deed from my pocket again. The paper was getting soft from the dampness in the air. I smoothed it out on my knee. Sparrow Creek, parcel 7B. I asked the bus driver. He said it's about 5 miles out of town, off an old logging road. 5 miles, in the cold rain, with our one bag. It felt like 100. Is there anything on it? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. A house? I shook my head, avoiding her eyes. The deed just says, unimproved land. That means it's empty, May. Just dirt. I saw her shoulders slump. I hated that look, the extinguishing of a tiny, fragile spark of hope. Hey, I said, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. It's fine. We'll check it out. Maybe there's a barn or an old shed or something. Something we can use for a few nights until we figure things out. It was a lie, and we both knew it. But it was a kinder lie than the truth, which was that we were standing in the middle of nowhere with nothing, walking toward a patch of dirt that was probably worth less than the paper it was printed on. We had to conserve our money, $27. It was a pathetic shield against the world. No motel, not even for a night. Food was the priority. We spotted a small grocery store down the street, its windows glowing with a warm, yellow light. It looked like the only living thing in the entire town. We went inside. The bell above the door jingled, and an old man behind the counter looked up from his newspaper, his eyes lingering on us for a second too long. We were outsiders. It was written all over our tired faces and damp clothes. We bought a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and 2 bottles of water. The total came to $9.42. I paid with a 10, and the clink of the change in my hand felt both heavy and insignificant. $17 and some change left. That was it. We stepped back out into the rain. Which way? Maya asked. I pointed down the main road, which seemed to dissolve into the misty darkness at the edge of town. That way. There's a gas station about a mile out. The driver said the logging road is right past it. The walk was miserable. The thin soles of my sneakers were soaked through in minutes. Each passing car threw a wave of icy water onto our legs. The duffel bag, slung over my shoulder, grew heavier with every step. Maya walked with her head down, a small, determined figure against the vast, indifferent landscape. There was no talking. There was nothing to say. We just put one foot in front of the other, fueled by the dregs of adrenaline and the faint, illogical hope that this wasn't all for nothing. The gas station was an island of light in the gloom. A single pump stood under a rusted metal awning. I told Maya to wait while I went inside to ask for more specific directions. The man behind the counter was young, maybe only a few years older than me, with a bored expression. He was scrolling through his phone. "Excuse me," I said. He looked up, annoyed. "Can you tell me where Sparrow Creek Road is?" He grunted. "Logging road, about a quarter mile that way," he said, gesturing with his thumb. "Ain't nothing down there. Hasn't been for 20 years. Road's probably washed out." "Is there a property? Parcel 7B?" I asked, a knot of desperation in my voice. He laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. "Man, I don't know about parcels. All that land out there is worthless. Owned by the timber company or some out-of-state developers now. You lost?" "No," I said, my voice tight. "We're not lost." I walked out, the man's laughter following me. Maya looked at my face and knew. "It's okay, Leo," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "We're almost there." We found the road, just as he'd said. It was barely a road anymore. 2 dirt tracks, overgrown with weeds and filled with muddy puddles. A rusted chain hung between 2 concrete posts, but it had been broken long ago. A faded, bullet-riddled sign nailed to a tree read, "Private property, no trespassing." This was it, our inheritance. We stepped over the broken chain and started walking into the woods. The logging road was worse than the main road. The mud sucked at our shoes with every step, and the overgrown branches of pine and nameless thorny bushes snagged at our clothes. The light was failing fast, the gray afternoon collapsing into a deep, starless twilight. The rain had softened to a mist that hung in the air, making everything feel close and claustrophobic. The only sounds were the squelch of our footsteps and the drip of water from the leaves. After what felt like an hour, my phone's GPS, which I'd been anxiously watching drain its battery, told us we were there. We stopped and looked around. It was nothing. Just more woods. Denser, if anything. A tangle of fallen trees, thick undergrowth, and moss-covered rocks. There was no clearing, no sign that a human had ever set foot here. "This is it?" Maya's voice was flat, all the forced optimism finally gone. "This is Parcel 7B. I felt a cold wave of despair wash over me, so intense it almost buckled my knees. This was the end of the line, a patch of useless, hostile wilderness. We were going to spend the night out here in the cold and the wet, and in the morning we would have nowhere to go. We had failed. I had failed. I sank down onto a mossy log, the duffel bag falling into the mud beside me. I put my head in my hands. The silence was absolute. Then Maya spoke. "Leo, look." I didn't look up. "What, May? It's nothing. It's all nothing." "No, look," she insisted, her voice sharp with something other than despair. Curiosity. I lifted my head. She was pointing. About 20 feet away, half hidden by a curtain of tangled vines and a thicket of young saplings, was something that didn't belong. It was a straight line in a world of chaotic, organic shapes. A line of gray, weathered concrete. I stood up, my heart starting to beat a little faster. We pushed our way through the wet branches. It wasn't just a line, it was the edge of a slab. A concrete pad, about 10 feet by 10 feet, set into the muddy hillside. Most of it was covered in a thick carpet of moss and dirt, but we could see its shape. And in the center of the slab was a rectangle of dark, rusted steel. A door. It was a hatch, set flush with the concrete, with a large wheel-like handle in the middle, like something on a submarine. It was almost completely buried. Only one corner and the wheel were visible. We looked at each other, a silent question passing between us. This was not on the deed. This was not unimproved land. This was something else entirely. "A bunker," Maya breathed, her eyes wide. Adrenaline surged through me, pushing back the cold and the despair. We dropped to our knees and started digging with our bare hands. The mud was cold and thick, full of sharp rocks and slick roots, but we didn't care. We clawed at the earth, pulling away handfuls of dirt and clumps of moss, slowly uncovering the edges of the steel door. It was heavy, solid. It was real. After 10 minutes of frantic work, we had cleared most of it. The wheel in the center was stiff with rust. I grabbed it with both hands and pulled. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. "Together," I grunted. Maya grabbed the other side of the wheel. We put all our weight into it, our feet slipping in the mud. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, With a deep, groaning screech of metal on metal that echoed through the quiet woods, it moved. Just an inch, but it moved. Hope, fierce and bright, flared in my chest. We pushed again, grunting with the effort. Another screech, louder this time, and the wheel turned a full quarter. There was a loud metallic clunk from beneath the door. It was unlocked. The door didn't have a handle to lift, just a recessed lip along one edge. I dug my fingers into it. It was heavy, so heavy. I pulled until my back screamed in protest, but I could only lift it an inch before it slammed back down. "We need to prop it," Maya said, her mind working faster than mine. She scrambled over to a fallen tree and came back dragging a thick, sturdy branch. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'll lift it. You get the branch under." I jammed my fingers back into the lip and pulled with everything I had. The muscles in my arms and back strained, and black spots danced in my vision. The heavy door rose slowly. 6 inches. A foot. "Now!" I yelled. Maya shoved the end of the branch into the gap. I let go, and the door settled onto the wood with a heavy thud. It was open. A square of perfect, absolute blackness yawned before us. The air that rose from it was cold and smelled of damp earth, concrete, and something else. The smell of a place that had been sealed for a very, very long time. I took out my phone, the battery now hovering at a terrifying 15%, and turned on the flashlight. I aimed the beam into the hole. A set of steep concrete steps led straight down into the dark. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and thin. The only answer was the faint echo of my own voice, swallowed by the darkness. This was either the stupidest thing we had ever done, or it was the only thing that could save us. There was no way to tell the difference. "I'm going down," I said. Maya grabbed my arm. "Leo, wait. We don't know what's in there." "We know what's out here," I countered, gesturing to the dark, wet woods. "Nothing. This is better than nothing." I handed her the duffel bag. "Stay here. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, I don't know. Go back to town. Find the police." It was a stupid plan, but it was the only one I had. She just shook her head, her grip tightening on my arm. "No, we go together." We went together. I went first, stepping carefully onto the top step. The concrete was slick with a fine layer of condensation. I held my phone out in front of me, its beam cutting a nervous, shaky path through the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder with each step down. The smell of stale, undisturbed air intensified, filling my lungs. It was the smell of a tomb. The steps ended on a small concrete landing. In front of us was a heavy steel door, identical to the one on the surface, this one with a simple lever handle. It was unlocked. I pushed it open, and it swung inward with a low groan. We stepped through, and I swept the phone's light around the room. It was a single, square space, maybe 15 feet by 15 feet. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all bare, poured concrete. It was completely empty. No, not completely. In one corner, there was a small pile of what looked like rotted canvas sacks. In the opposite corner, a simple wooden pallet, as if for a bed. And against the far wall, covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, was a dark green metal footlocker. My light lingered on it. It was the only object of any substance in the entire bunker. It felt like the period at the end of a long, unreadable sentence. Maya let out a breath she'd been holding. "It's empty." There was disappointment in her voice, but also relief. At least there were no bodies, no monsters. just a cold, empty box. "It's dry," I said, running my hand along the concrete wall. It was cool to the touch, but perfectly dry. "And it's out of the rain." That was more than we'd had an hour ago. We brought the duffel bag inside, and with one last look at the dripping woods, pulled the heavy inner door shut. The sound of it closing was a deep, definitive thud, cutting off the outside world completely. The silence was sudden and absolute. It was the kind of quiet that pressed in on you, making the sound of your own heartbeat seem deafeningly loud. I set the phone down on the floor, angling the light upwards so it gave the room a dim, theatrical glow. We sat down on the floor, leaning against the cold wall, and opened the loaf of bread and the peanut butter. We ate in silence, the simple food tasting better than anything I could remember. It was a strange sort of picnic. Two homeless kids in a concrete box buried in the woods, miles from anyone, with $17 to their names. It was bleak. It was terrifying. But it was also the first time in days I had felt something other than pure panic. Here, in this sealed concrete room, we were hidden. We were, for the moment, safe. After we ate, my curiosity got the better of me. I walked over to the footlocker. It was an old military-style chest, solid and heavy. The latches were rusted, but the lock in the center was a simple, old-fashioned padlock. "It's locked," I said, stating the obvious. Maya came over and knelt beside me. "What do you think is inside?" "Money," she whispered, the hope back in her voice. "Maybe he left us money." "Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. This whole situation felt too strange, too grim for such a simple solution. I looked around the bunker. My eyes fell on the pile of rotted sacks. I walked over and kicked at them. They fell apart, releasing a puff of dust. Underneath them was a crowbar. It was heavy and rusted, but solid. It felt like it had been left there for a reason. I carried it back to the chest. I wedged the flat end under the hasp of the lock and put my weight on it. The metal of the chest groaned in protest. I pushed harder, and with a loud crack, the hasp tore away from the lid. The lock fell to the floor with a clatter. We looked at each other for a beat, our breath held. I lifted the lid. The hinges creaked like a haunted house sound effect. I aimed the phone's light inside. There was no money, no gold bars, no treasure. The chest was filled with paper. Stacks and stacks of letters, tied in neat bundles with twine. On top of the letters was a small, brick-like device with a handle on the side. It was a hand-crank audio recorder, the kind journalists used to use decades ago, and next to it, a single sealed envelope with 2 words written on the front in that same neat script I recognized from the deed. It said, "For you." My hand trembled as I picked up the envelope. For you. Not for our mother, not for our grandmother. For us. For whoever found this place. It felt impossible, a message sent across a gulf of 40 years, aimed at 2 kids who shouldn't have even existed in the sender's mind. I tore it open. Inside was a single, yellowed sheet of paper, folded twice. The ink was faded, but legible. Maya leaned in close, her shoulder pressed against mine, as I began to read it aloud, my voice shaky in the profound silence of the bunker. "If you are reading this," it began, "then I am long gone, and the world has taken a turn I had hoped to prevent. My name is Thomas Vance. This land and this shelter is yours now. I don't know who you are, a grandchild perhaps, or a great-grandchild. All I know is that if you have come to this place, it is because you are in need of shelter. and I have failed to protect my family well enough to keep you from that need. For that, I am sorry." I paused, my throat tight. The formal, somber tone of the words felt heavy in the small room. He was apologizing to us. A stranger, a ghost, was apologizing for our lives. "This bunker is not a monument to paranoia," the letter continued. "It is a penance. In my youth, I was a different man. I ran with a crew in the city. We weren't kingpins, just small-time operators who moved things from one place to another, no questions asked. I was good with numbers, and I helped them hide their money. It was a mistake, a sin of pride and greed that has haunted every day of my life since. I got out. I met your grandmother, and she saved me from myself. We moved away, started a family, and I tried to be a good man. But a debt like that is never truly paid. I lived in fear that my old life would one day find me and find my family." I looked at Maya. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the small, bright light of the phone. We were learning more about our grandfather in these few sentences than we had ever known. He wasn't just a name on a deed. He was a man with a past, with secrets. I kept reading. "I built this place with my own 2 hands, on land no one wanted, far from everything. It was my ark, a place to hide my wife and child if the flood ever came. It never did. My old associates faded into memory or prison. My daughter, your mother or grandmother, grew up safe and sound. She never knew about this place. I never wanted her to carry my fear. I wanted her to be free. This bunker became a monument to a disaster that never happened, a testament to my guilt." The last paragraph was short. "Inside this chest, you will find my story. In the letters I wrote to my wife, Eleanor, while I was building this place. You will also find a recording. Listen to it. When you are done, look for the loose stone in the floor beneath the pallet. What is under it is also yours. Use it wisely. Use it to build something better than a hiding place. Use it to build a home. Your grandfather, Thomas." We sat in stunned silence. The air was thick with the weight of his confession. This wasn't a fallout shelter. It was a safe house, a hiding place from a life of crime we never knew he'd led. My image of him, a vague, smiling old man from a single faded photograph, was being completely redrawn. He was a man who had been scared, who had been hiding, and who had built his fear into the very earth beneath our feet. I looked over at the wooden pallet in the corner. Then I looked at the stacks of letters and the strange, hand-cranked recorder. "What do we do first?" Maya asked. "We listen," I said, picking up the recorder. It felt heavy, solid. There was a small cassette tape visible through a little window. I found the crank and started turning it. It was stiff at first, then it moved more easily, a quiet whirring sound filling the room. I found a button that looked like a play symbol and pressed it. For a moment, there was only the hiss of old tape. Then, a voice. A man's voice, older with a slight gravelly edge, but clear and strong. It was our grandfather. "Eleanor," the voice said, and the sound of it, so real and present in this concrete tomb, sent a shiver down my spine. "It's October. The leaves are turning. It's beautiful out here, but it's cold. The work is slow. My hands are raw, but the walls are poured. It's starting to look like something. I know you worry. I know you think I'm crazy, burying our money and my time in this hole in the ground. But every time I mix the concrete, every time I swing the hammer, I feel like I'm building a wall around our girl, a wall they can never break through. I'm buying her a peaceful night's sleep, even if I have to lose my own. The recording was short. It clicked off, leaving us in silence again. But the room was different now. It was filled with his presence, with his voice. This wasn't just a concrete box anymore. It was a project, a promise. It was an act of love, born from fear. We turned to the letters next. We unbundled the first stack. They were dated, chronicling the construction of the bunker. He wrote about the difficulty of getting materials out here without drawing attention, buying a few bags of cement at a time from different towns. He wrote about the blisters on his hands, the ache in his back. He wrote about our mother as a little girl, and his fierce, desperate love for her. But as we read further, into letters written years later, the tone changed. He wrote about his attempts to track down his old associates. Most were dead or in jail, as he'd said. But one, the leader, a man named Silas, had simply disappeared. "He's a ghost," one letter read. "No records, no trace. It's like he never existed. Or he got smart and became someone else. That's what scares me, Ellie. A man like that doesn't just retire. He waits." Then we found the last bundle of letters. They were different. They weren't to our grandmother. They were research. Printouts from early internet pages, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes. He had been looking for Silas for decades, and he had found him. Or at least, he'd found his new life. Silas had changed his name and started a legitimate business, a very successful one, a property development corporation. The name of the corporation was written at the top of a sheet of letterhead he must have gotten somehow. Northwood Holdings, Inc. The name meant nothing to me, but the weight of it, the culmination of our grandfather's lifelong fear, was terrifying. He had built this bunker to hide from a man who had, in the end, become a legitimate millionaire. It seemed so futile, so sad. I looked at my phone. The battery was at 5%. The light flickered. "Leo," Maya said, her voice small. "The pallet." I had almost forgotten. We crawled over to the wooden pallet and pushed it aside. The concrete floor beneath was seamless, except for one square stone, about 2 feet by 2 feet. It had a small drilled hole in one corner, just big enough to get your fingers into. It was the loose stone. I hooked my fingers in the hole and pulled. It was heavy, but it lifted out easily. Beneath it was a cavity, a dark space lined with metal. It was a small, built-in safe. And inside that safe was a large canvas bank bag and a thick, leather-bound ledger. I pulled the bag out first. It was heavy, so heavy. I fumbled with the drawstring, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned it upside down, and onto the dusty concrete floor spilled stacks of cash. Not millions, not a fortune, but it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was all old bills, 50s and 20s, held together by brittle paper bands. We counted it, our hands shaking. It was $32,000. And the ledger. I opened it. It was our grandfather's accounting book from his criminal days. Names, dates, amounts, a detailed record of every dirty dollar he had ever helped hide. At the bottom of the last page, he had written a final note. "This is my confession, and this is my seed money. It's dirty money, washed clean by time and fear. It's not enough to run on, but it might be enough to stand your ground. The choice is yours." $32,000, and a book of evidence against a man who was now a powerful developer. This wasn't an inheritance, it was a weapon, and a terrible, crushing burden. The weight of it all, the cold, the dark, The impossible story we had just unearthed. It all came crashing down on me. I leaned my head against the cold concrete wall, and for the first time since we'd been kicked out, I cried. Not loud, just silent, hot tears tracking paths through the grime on my face. I cried for the grandfather I never knew, a man so haunted by his past he buried a box of love and fear in the ground. I cried for my mother, who lived her life never knowing the shadow she had been protected from. And I cried for us, for Maya and me, two kids alone in a concrete hole, holding a ghost's life savings and his final, impossible choice. The phone died. The small beam of light that had been our only anchor in the darkness blinked twice, then went out, plunging us into a blackness so complete it felt solid. It was a physical pressure against my eyes. I could hear Maya's sharp intake of breath beside me. The silence rushed back in, deeper and more absolute than before. We were truly buried now. I fumbled in the dark, my hands finding the stacks of cash, the hard cover of the ledger, the cold metal of the recorder. It was all real. This wasn't a nightmare. "Leo?" Maya's voice was a tiny thread in the vast blackness. "I'm here," I said, my own voice sounding rough. "It's okay. We're okay." But we weren't. We were two teenagers in a bunker with a pile of dirty money and a book that could get us killed. My grandfather's words echoed in my head. "Stand your ground." How were we supposed to do that? We were kids. We didn't know how to fight a ghost, let alone a powerful developer. The easy answer was right there, in a pile on the floor. Take the money. Take it and run. Disappear. Get an apartment in some anonymous city, change our names, and try to forget this bunker, this story, ever happened. It was the smart thing to do, the sane thing to do. But then I thought of the sound of my grandfather's voice on that tape, the love and fear all mixed together. I'm buying her a peaceful night's sleep, even if I have to lose my own. He hadn't run. He had stayed. He had built. He had prepared. Selling this land, abandoning this bunker, felt like a betrayal of that sacrifice. It felt like letting Silas, or whatever he called himself now, win. I don't know how long we sat there in the dark, lost in our own thoughts. It could have been minutes or hours. Time ceased to have meaning in that sealed room. Eventually, the sheer emotional and physical exhaustion of the last few days caught up with us. We found the duffel bag, pulled out our spare clothes and my one extra sweatshirt, and made a pathetic pile of bedding on the floor. We lay down close together, for warmth and for comfort, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke to a faint gray light. For a confused moment, I thought I was back on the bus, but the air was cold and still. I sat up. The light was coming from the edges of the inner steel door. It wasn't sealed perfectly. Morning had come. I stood up, my body stiff and sore from sleeping on the concrete. I pushed the heavy door open and was met with a wall of cool, clean, pine-scented air. I walked up the concrete steps and pushed open the hatch on the surface. The rain had stopped. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, and the morning sun was filtering through the canopy of trees, sending down dappled shafts of light that made the wet leaves glitter. The world was washed clean. It was beautiful. Maya came up behind me, and we stood there for a moment in the entrance of our hole in the ground, blinking in the sudden brightness. It felt like being born. "What now?" she asked, shielding her eyes with her hand. "Now," I said, feeling a resolve harden inside me, "we learn how to stand our ground." We spent the morning making a plan. A fragile, half-baked plan, but a plan nonetheless. First, We needed to make the bunker livable. Second, we needed to understand our legal position. What did owning this land actually mean? And third, we had to decide what to do about Northwood Holdings and the ledger. We hid the money and the ledger back in the floor safe, replacing the stone cover. It felt safer there, buried under a second layer of concrete and earth. Then we walked back to town. The 5-mile trek felt different this time. The sun was out. We weren't running from something anymore. We were walking toward something. The town of Blackwood looked less bleak in the daylight. There were people on the street, cars parked in front of the stores. It was still run down, but it was alive. Our first stop was a hardware store we had missed the day before. It was a dusty, old-fashioned place that smelled of sawdust and fertilizer. We used some of our precious $27, now $17, to buy heavy-duty trash bags, a stiff broom, work gloves, and 2 powerful flashlights with extra batteries. It felt like a monumental purchase. It was an investment in a future. As we were leaving the store, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows cruised slowly down the main street. It was the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in a town like Blackwood. It slowed as it passed us, and I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. I couldn't see who was inside, but I had a sick feeling I knew. It was a warning, a reminder that we were being watched. The car continued on and turned down the road leading out of town, the road toward our land. I grabbed Maya's arm. "We have to go, now." We didn't run, but we walked fast, our new purchases banging against our legs. My mind was racing. Was it him? Was it Silas? After all these years? Had he somehow known we were here? It seemed impossible. More likely, my grandfather's research was right. Northwood Holdings was buying up land in the area. This was just a scout. But it felt like a ghost had just driven past us. When we got back to the property, the SUV was parked by the broken chain at the entrance to the logging road. A man in an expensive-looking suit was standing there, looking into the woods, his back to us. He was talking on his phone. He was tall, with perfectly styled silver hair. He looked out of place, a creature from another world. He turned as we approached, and his eyes, a pale, cold blue, swept over us with dismissive appraisal. He ended his call and slid the phone into his pocket. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was smooth, polished, but with an undercurrent of impatience. "This is private property," I said, my own voice sounding young and thin by comparison. "Indeed it is," he said with a small, unamusing smile. "It's a forgotten parcel my company is in the process of acquiring, part of a larger regional development project. Are you two lost? The state park is about 10 miles west of here." "We're not lost," Maya said, her voice surprisingly firm. "This is our property." The man's smile tightened. He looked from the deed I was now holding in my hand to our damp clothes and our cheap hardware store bags. "Is that so? I'm afraid there must be some mistake. This parcel has been flagged for acquisition due to years of unpaid property taxes." My heart sank. Of course. We owned the land, but we didn't own it free and clear. There would be debts, complications, the system. "We can sort that out," I said, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. The man sighed, a theatrical display of boredom. "Listen, kids, I'm a busy man. My name is Arthur Croft. I'm with Northwood Holdings. We're prepared to offer you a settlement to relinquish your claim. A finder's fee, if you will. Let's say $50,000. Cash. It's more than this useless piece of dirt is worth. You can take it, get yourselves a nice apartment somewhere, and forget all about this place. $50,000. It was an insane amount of money. It was a ticket out. It was everything we had dreamed of just 24 hours ago. An easy escape. I looked at Maya. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the temptation. It was a lifeline. But I also saw the memory of our grandfather's voice, of his sacrifice. And I looked at this man, Arthur Croft, with his cold eyes and his easy offer. He was trying to erase this place, to erase our grandfather's story. And in that moment, the choice became startlingly clear. It wasn't even a choice. "It's not for sale," I said. Croft's eyebrow went up. He seemed genuinely surprised and then annoyed. "Don't be foolish, son. This is a one-time offer. Take the deal." "The property is not for sale," I repeated, my voice stronger this time. He stared at me for a long moment, his smile gone completely. His face was a mask of cold calculation. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card. "I see," he said, his voice now laced with a chillingly pleasant tone. "Think about it. The offer is good for 48 hours. After that, we'll be forced to proceed through other legal avenues. It will get messy, and you will walk away with nothing. The choice is yours." He slid back into his SUV without another word. The engine started with a low purr, and the vehicle drove away, leaving us standing in a cloud of dust, the business card in my hand. Arthur Croft, Northwood Holdings Incorporated. It was him. It had to be. Maybe the name was different, but the ghost was real. And he had just threatened us. The business card felt cold in my hand. Arthur Croft, Vice President of Acquisitions, Northwood Holdings Incorporated. It was a different name, but the company was the one from my grandfather's research. It was Silas. He hadn't just disappeared. He had rebranded. He had laundered his entire identity, becoming a legitimate, powerful man. And now, by some cosmic, cruel twist of fate, he wanted the one piece of land his old, forgotten enemy had consecrated as a sanctuary. We stood there for a long time after the SUV disappeared, the silence of the woods pressing in again. The $50,000 offer hung in the air between us. It was a fortune. It was a clean slate. "We could take it," Maya said softly, not looking at me. "We could just go. We'd be safe. We'd have a life." I knew she was right. It was the logical choice, the self-preservation choice. But my grandfather's words were a constant refrain in my mind. "Stand your ground. Use it to build a home." "He's not just buying land, May," I said. "He's trying to bury a story. Our story. Grandfather's story." I looked at the entrance to the logging road, at the path leading to our hidden bunker. "This is the only thing that's ever been ours, really ours. If we sell it to him, we have nothing." She was quiet for a moment, then she nodded, a small, resolute movement. "Okay," she said, "so we fight." The threat of other legal avenues was real. We were two teenagers with a questionable deed against a major corporation. We were outgunned in every conceivable way. We needed help, real help. Back in the bunker, the new flashlights cast a bright, steady glow, pushing back the shadows. The place already felt different, less like a tomb, more like a fortress. Among the few things in the footlocker, besides the letters and the recorder, was a thin, old-fashioned phone book for Blackwood and the surrounding county. It felt like another piece of the puzzle my grandfather had left us. I flipped through the yellowed pages, looking for the one thing we needed most: a lawyer. Most of the listings were for firms in the bigger city an hour away. But there was one, a small, single-line entry under attorneys. Robert Henderson, attorney at law. It listed a local address and a phone number. A small town lawyer. He was probably our only shot. We didn't have a phone, but there was a payphone outside the grocery store in town. We walked back, the urgency making our steps quick. I fed a precious quarter into the slot and dialed the number. An older man answered on the second ring, his voice gruff. "Henderson?" Yes, hello," I stammered. "My name is Leo Vance. I'm looking for legal advice." "You and everyone else," he grumbled. "What's the trouble?" I hesitated, unsure how to even begin. "It's about a property and a development company, Northwood Holdings." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The silence stretched. "Vance, you said?" "Yes, Leo Vance." Another pause. "Thomas Vance was your grandfather." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. My heart skipped a beat. "Yes, you knew him?" "I knew him," Henderson said, his voice softer now, the gruffness gone. "My office is above the hardware store. Be there in an hour." He hung up. I stood there with the dead receiver in my hand, stunned. He knew our grandfather. This wasn't a random chance. This was another breadcrumb on the trail Thomas Vance had left for us. Robert Henderson's office was small and cluttered, smelling of old paper, pipe tobacco, and coffee. Books and files were stacked on every available surface. He was an old man, probably in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair, a face full of wrinkles, and sharp, intelligent eyes behind thick glasses. He watched us as we walked in, his expression unreadable. "Sit," he said, gesturing to two worn leather chairs. We told him everything. We started with being kicked out, the deed, finding the bunker. We told him about the footlocker, the letters, the money, the ledger. We told him about Arthur Croft's visit, the offer, and the threat. I pushed the business card across the desk to him. He listened patiently, his hands steepled under his chin, not interrupting once. When we were finished, he picked up the business card and stared at it. "Arthur Croft," he said, tasting the name. "Never heard of him. But Northwood has been sniffing around here for a year, buying up old timber parcels, delinquent properties. The whole county is buzzing about some big resort they're planning." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "You're sure about the name? Silas?" "That's what my grandfather's letter said," I confirmed. "And the ledger has his name all over it." Henderson leaned back in his chair, which squeaked in protest. "Tommy always was a complicated man," he said, almost to himself. "I helped him with the deed for that land 40 years ago. He told me he wanted a place to go camping, to get away from it all. I never bought it. He wasn't the camping type. He was the looking-over-your-shoulder type." He looked from me to Maya, his expression softening with something like pity. "He's left you a hell of a mess, kids. This ledger, this is dynamite, but it's old, and Silas, or Croft, is now a legitimate, powerful man. Waving this thing around could get you killed, or worse, ignored. A 40-year-old handwritten book against a team of high-priced lawyers? They'll bury you." The hope that had been building in me began to curdle. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We can't just sell it to him." "No," Henderson said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "No, we can't do that. That wouldn't be any fun at all." For the first time, I felt a spark of genuine, solid hope. We weren't alone in this anymore. "First thing," he said, his voice all business now, "is to handle the tax issue. Croft was telling the truth about that. Your grandfather stopped paying the property taxes about 10 years ago, probably around the time he passed. The county has a lien on the property, but you're the legal heirs. You have the right to pay the back taxes and clear the title. It's about $3,000. $3,000, a tenth of the money in the bunker. It was a lot, but we had it. We can pay it, I said. Good, Henderson nodded. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow. That will stop any foreclosure auction and make your claim ironclad. Northwood won't be able to touch it through the county. They'll have to deal with you directly. And then? Maya asked. And then, Henderson said, leaning forward, a glint in his eye, we wait. The burden of action is on them. They want the land. Let them make the next move. In the meantime, you two need to lay low and be smart. That bunker is your home now. Make it one. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Don't worry about my fee. We'll call it a professional courtesy. For Tommy. We walked out of his office and back into the late afternoon sun, the world feeling both more dangerous and more hopeful than ever before. We had an ally. We had a plan. We had a home to build. The next few weeks were a blur of hard physical work. We spent hours cleaning the bunker. We swept out 40 years of dust and debris. We scrubbed the concrete walls and floor with bleach and water, lugged in jugs from a stream near the property. The musty, tomb-like smell slowly gave way to the clean, sharp scent of bleach and damp earth. We used the heavy-duty trash bags to haul out the rotted canvas and other junk, burying it deep in the woods. We bought 2 cheap cots and thin mattresses from the town's general store, along with a small propane stove and a lantern. Slowly, painstakingly, the empty concrete box started to transform. We organized our few belongings. We made a pantry for our food. We designated a corner for washing. It was Spartan. It was cold, but it was ours. Every nail we hammered, every surface we scrubbed, felt like an act of defiance. We weren't just cleaning a room, we were reclaiming our lives. We were building a home, just as our grandfather had instructed. And with every passing day, the $50,000 offer seemed more and more like a devil's bargain we were grateful to have refused. The seasons began to turn. The deep green of summer slowly faded. The edges of the leaves on the maple and oak trees fringed with yellow and red. The air grew crisp in the mornings, and the nights in the bunker turned from cool to genuinely cold. We bought sleeping bags rated for low temperatures and learned to sleep in layers. Life settled into a strange, new rhythm, dictated by daylight and the simple, pressing needs of survival. We fell into a routine. Mornings were for work on the bunker and the land. We cleared a small patch of ground near the entrance, cutting back the thorny bushes and pulling up the weeds. We found the remains of an old well, lined with stone, and with a heroic effort, managed to clear it of decades of debris. The water was icy cold and tasted of minerals, but it was clean. It felt like a miracle, a gift from the land itself. Afternoons, we would walk into town. We had to. The $32,000, which had seemed like a fortune, was dwindling at an alarming rate. After paying the back taxes to Mr. Henderson and buying our initial supplies, we knew it wouldn't last forever. It was seed money, as our grandfather had said, not a retirement fund. It was meant to help us stand our ground, not to make us comfortable. So we looked for work. It wasn't easy. We were the strange kids who lived out in the woods. But Blackwood was a town that valued hard work over pedigree. Maya, with her quiet diligence, got a job washing dishes and bussing tables at the town's only diner. I found work with a local handyman, a gruff but fair man named Sal, who needed an extra pair of hands for roofing jobs, clearing gutters, and other odd jobs around the county. The work was hard. My hands, which had been soft from a life indoors, became calloused and rough. I came home every evening bone-tired, covered in dirt or tar. But the small wad of cash in my pocket felt more real, more earned than any of the money hidden in the floor of the bunker. We were paying our own way. We were building our own lives. We saw Mr. Henderson once a week. He would update us on the legal situation, which was, for the most part, a stalemate. Northwood Holdings had sent a few more letters, their offers increasing slightly, their legal language growing more aggressive. Henderson responded to each with a terse, formal letter, stating that the property was not for sale. It was a war of attrition, fought with paper and postage stamps. "They're trying to wear you down," he told us one afternoon, looking over a new letter from Northwood's legal team. "They'll file motions, challenge the deed's provenance, claim eminent domain for economic development. Their strategy is to make it so expensive and so exhausting for you to fight that you finally give up." "We're not giving up," Maya said, her voice steely. She had changed in the past few months. The frightened girl from the bus was gone, replaced by a young woman with a quiet, unshakable resolve. Henderson smiled. "I know, and they're starting to figure that out, which is why you need to remain careful." He never let us forget the danger. He held on to the ledger, keeping it locked in a safe in his office. "This is our trump card," he would say, tapping the old book. "And you only play a trump card when the stakes are highest, not before." The people in town started to get used to us. The initial suspicion faded, replaced by a kind of curious respect. The old woman who ran the grocery store would slip an extra apple into Maya's bag. Sal started teaching me how to properly frame a wall. The waitress at the diner would make sure Maya got a hot meal at the end of her shift. They didn't ask about our past or where we lived. They just saw two kids who worked hard and didn't cause trouble. We were slowly, unintentionally, weaving ourselves into the fabric of this forgotten little town. One evening in late autumn, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and purple, I was sitting on the concrete slab outside the bunker, just breathing the cold, clean air. I had spent the day helping Sal replace the roof on an old barn, and every muscle in my body ached. But it was a good ache, the ache of accomplishment. Maya came and sat next to me, handing me a mug of hot tea from our little propane stove. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the woods sink into shadow. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "A real house, a TV, a hot shower?" I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the series of temporary rooms we had called home. The foster houses, with their strange smells and unspoken rules. The constant feeling of being a guest, of being temporary, of waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I miss a hot shower," I admitted with a small laugh. "But I don't miss feeling like I didn't belong. I don't miss being afraid all the time." I looked at our small, half-hidden hatch. This place is more of a home than any of those houses ever were. We built this. It's ours. She leaned her head on my shoulder, just as she had on the bus, but it felt different now. It wasn't the gesture of a scared child seeking comfort. It was the gesture of a partner, an equal. "He would be proud of us, I think," she said softly. "Our grandfather." "Yeah," I said, my throat suddenly thick. "I think he would." That winter was hard. The snow came early and stayed late, blanketing the woods in a thick layer of white. The bunker was a haven of relative warmth against the biting cold. We learned the art of conservation, of making our propane and battery supplies last. There were days we were snowed in, unable to make the trek to town. On those days, we would read the books we'd started buying from the town's tiny second-hand store, or I would study for the GED exam I had decided to take. We would read our grandfather's letters again, not for clues, but for connection. His words were a link to a past that was now inextricably part of our present. The silence of the snow-covered woods was profound, but it was a peaceful silence, not a threatening one. The bunker, our concrete fortress, held fast against the winter. It kept us safe. It kept us warm. It was our home, and we were no longer just surviving in it. We were living. Spring arrived like a promise fulfilled. The snow melted, the streams swelled, and the woods came alive with a riot of green. The thaw brought with it a new move from Northwood Holdings. A notice arrived at Mr. Henderson's office. They were suing us. The lawsuit was a tangle of legal jargon, but the gist was simple. They were challenging the validity of our deed, claiming a break in the chain of title. They were also petitioning the county to seize the land under eminent domain, arguing that their proposed luxury resort and golf course would bring invaluable economic development to the depressed region. "It's the move we were expecting," Henderson said, his face grim as he explained it to us. "They're done playing nice. This is brute force. They're going to try and bleed us dry in court." "Can they win?" I asked, a cold knot of fear forming in my stomach. "They can," he said honestly. "They have a team of lawyers who will file motions until the sun burns out. They'll bury us in paperwork. A judge might see a multi-million-dollar resort as more valuable to the community than 1 acre of woods with 2 teenagers living in a hole." The helplessness was back. For all our hard work, for all our resolve, we could still lose. We could be swept aside by a legal tide we had no power to stop. "It's time," I said, looking at Henderson. "It's time for the ledger." He looked at me for a long moment, then at Maya. He saw the same determination in her eyes. "It's a risky play, Leo, a very risky play. Introducing it in court could be dismissed as slander. Going to the press could be seen as libel. Croft is a respected businessman. We're 2 kids and a dead man's diary." "It's the only move we have left," I insisted. "Grandfather didn't leave it for us to keep it a secret. He left it for us to use, to stand our ground." Henderson sighed, running a hand through his white hair. "All right," he said. "But we're not going to be stupid about it. We're not going to court, and we're not going to the press. We're going to him." The plan was simple, audacious, and terrifying. Mr. Henderson drafted a letter, not to Northwood's legal department, but to Arthur Croft directly. It was delivered by courier to his corporate headquarters in the city. The letter was brief. It stated that we had come into possession of certain documents belonging to our late grandfather, Thomas Vance. It mentioned a ledger detailing business transactions from the late 1970s and early 1980s. It suggested that a private meeting to discuss the future of Parcel 7B in Sparrow Creek might be mutually beneficial. We didn't make a threat. We didn't make a demand. We just lit a fuse and waited to see if the bomb would go off. For a week, there was nothing. The silence from the city was deafening. Every time the phone rang in Sal's workshop, my heart leaped into my throat. I started seeing black SUVs in every shadow. The fear was back, sharp and coiling. Then, one afternoon, Mr. Henderson called me at the workshop. "He responded," Henderson said, his voice tight. "He wants a meeting, tomorrow, at the property." The final confrontation, It was here. I felt a wave of nausea, and, beneath it, a surge of adrenaline. We were going to meet the ghost. The next day was overcast and heavy, the air thick with unspoken tension. We met Mr. Henderson at the entrance to the logging road. He was wearing a proper suit, looking more like a city lawyer than he ever had. He carried a locked briefcase. "The ledger is in here," he said, "along with a certified copy. The original is in a bank's safe deposit box, just in case." We walked down the muddy track to our clearing. The bunker hatch, which had become such a normal part of our landscape, looked alien and forbidding today. We didn't have to wait long. We heard the crunch of tires, and the same black SUV we'd seen before pulled carefully down the road and parked. Arthur Croft got out. He was alone. He was dressed more casually this time, in expensive slacks and a cashmere sweater, as if he were visiting his country estate. He looked around the clearing, his eyes lingering on the bunker hatch with a look of faint disgust. "An impressive setup," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Very rustic." "Cut the crap, Croft," Henderson said, his voice hard as stone. "Or should I call you Silas?" Croft's polite mask didn't slip, but I saw a flicker in his cold blue eyes, a flicker of something ancient and ugly. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said smoothly. "My name is Arthur Croft. Now, you mentioned a ledger?" Henderson placed the briefcase on the concrete slab and opened it. He took out the ledger and laid it on top. "Thomas Vance's accounting book. I believe you're familiar with its contents." Croft, or Silas, stared at the book. For the first time I saw a crack in his composure. His jaw tightened. He knew exactly what it was. He had spent a lifetime running from that book. "It's a work of fiction," he said, his voice a low growl. "The ramblings of a dead, paranoid old man. It proves nothing." "It proves a motive," Henderson countered. "It explains why a man like you, a man with $1 billion company, is so obsessed with one worthless acre of land in the middle of nowhere. This isn't about a resort. This is about tying up loose ends. It's about burying the last piece of your old life, the life of Silas, the man who ran a criminal enterprise." Silas looked from the book to me and then to Maya. His eyes were filled with a venomous hatred that chilled me to the bone. This was the man my grandfather had feared. This was the monster. "What do you want?" he hissed. "You can't prove anything. I'll sue you for libel until your great-grandchildren are in debt." "We don't want to prove anything," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "We just want to be left alone." I took a step forward. "This land is our home. It's all we have, and you can't have it. Not for 50,000, not for 1,000,000. You can't have it." I was just a kid in muddy boots, standing in front of a powerful, dangerous man. But I wasn't just a kid. I was Thomas Vance's grandson, and I was standing on his ground. "You will drop the lawsuit," Henderson said, his voice like a judge's gavel. "You will instruct your company to forget this parcel of land ever existed. You will remove it from all your development plans, and you will never, ever come back here. In exchange, this ledger and all its copies remain private. A piece of history, nothing more." Silas stared at us, his mind clearly working, calculating the odds, the risks. He could fight. He could probably win in court. But the story, the accusation, would be out there. The mud would stick. A whiff of scandal was all it took to topple men like him. He looked at the bunker, at the woods, at us. He looked at the legacy of the one man who had ever gotten away from him. A legacy that had passed down to 2 stubborn kids who refused to run. Finally, he gave a short, sharp nod. "Done," he spat, the word like a piece of poison in his mouth. He turned without another word, got into his SUV, and drove away. We listened until the sound of his engine faded completely, replaced by the whisper of the wind in the pines. We had won. In the days and weeks that followed, the world quietly rearranged itself. The lawsuit was dropped. A formal letter from Northwood Holdings, signed by some anonymous underling, arrived at Mr. Henderson's office, stating they were no longer pursuing acquisition of Parcel 7B. It was over. The ghost was gone. The weight that had been pressing down on us for months was lifted. The air felt lighter. The woods seemed brighter. The future, which had been a narrow, terrifying path, suddenly opened up into a wide, uncertain, but hopeful vista. We didn't celebrate with a party. Our victory was too quiet, too personal for that. We celebrated by working. We finished building a small, lean-to woodshed against the side of the bunker entrance. I passed my GED exam. Maya enrolled in online high school classes, using the town library's spotty internet. We used a small portion of the money from the floor safe to buy a beat-up but reliable old pickup truck. It was freedom. It meant no more 5-mile walks in the rain. It meant we could haul supplies, take on more work. It meant we were no longer just residents of the bunker. We were residents of Blackwood. The $32,000 became what our grandfather intended it to be, a foundation. We weren't living off it. We were building on it. The bunker remained our home. We made it more comfortable. We installed a small solar panel array on a cleared patch of the hill, enough to power a few lights, a laptop, and a small refrigerator. We built bunk beds to save space. We even painted the concrete walls a warm, cheerful white. It was still a bunker, a concrete box in the ground, but it was a home filled with light and life. Mr. Henderson became a permanent fixture in our lives, a surrogate grandfather. We'd have dinner with him once a month. He'd tell us stories about the town, about our grandfather, the good parts, the funny parts. He helped us navigate the complexities of being young adults with no family to guide us, from opening a bank account to filing taxes. He showed us that family wasn't always about blood. It was about the people who showed up for you. One day, I found an old photograph in one of the letter bundles I had overlooked. It was of our grandfather, Thomas, and our grandmother, Eleanor, standing on the property. It must have been taken shortly after he bought it. The woods were thinner then. They were smiling. He had his arm around her, and he was pointing at the hillside where the bunker would one day be. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at her, and his face was full of a fierce, protective love. And I finally understood. He hadn't just been a man running from his past. He was a man running toward a future for his family. He had poured all his fear, all his regret, and all his love into this patch of earth, into this concrete box. He had created a sanctuary, hoping his family would never need it, but ensuring it would be there if they did. The inheritance wasn't the land or the money or the ledger. The inheritance was the choice he gave us, to run or to stand our ground. And in choosing to stay, to fight, to build, we had finally, truly understood him. We had honored his legacy. Years have passed since that day. Maya is in college now, studying to be a nurse. She comes home on weekends and holidays, home to the bunker. I still live here. I took over Sal's handyman business when he retired. I fix roofs, build decks, and help my neighbors keep their homes standing. I'm a part of this town now. The bunker is different. It has an addition now, a small wooden cabin I built myself, connected to the original hatch. It has big windows that look out into the woods. but the concrete heart of it is still there. The steps leading down, the steel door, the single room where our new life began. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I go down there and sit in the silence. I think about the two scared kids who stumbled into this place with nothing but $4 and a broken piece of hope. I think about how a place of fear became a place of strength, how a hiding place became a home. Home isn't a place you're given. It's not always a house with a picket fence. Sometimes, home is a hole in the ground. Sometimes, it's a choice you make. Sometimes, it's a promise you keep to a ghost. It's the place where you learn to stand your ground, not against the world, but for yourself. It's the place you build, not with wood and nails, but with courage and love. This has been my story, and if you've made it this far, thank you for listening. So many of us have stories about finding home in the most unexpected of places, of building a life when it felt like all the doors were closed. This channel is for us. It's a community for people who understand that the hardest paths often lead to the most beautiful destinations. If this story resonated with you, if it touched something in your own experience, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. And I really want to hear from you. Go down to the comments and share your story. What does home mean to you? Have you ever had to build your own from scratch? I promise you, I read every single comment. Your stories matter. You are not alone. Thank you for being here.